A lot of bronze fans in the house.
Mic check, mic check.
Check, check. Check, check. Oh, sorry, we have a conversation.
2 years? Grimes. Names says it all.
Oh, check, check.
Grimes.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I know this is going to be a lively crowd because questions are coming already. My name is Kidon Diaz, and I'm the Executive Director at Land Community Health Center. Land, along with the following community groups, the Mimico Residents Association, Mimico Lakeshore Community Network, and the New Toronto Lakeshore Villages Residents Association, have partnered to organize tonight's meeting. As well, I'd like to recognize all the volunteers here who have helped to get everything going this evening. Thank you. Thank you for coming out in such numbers and supporting the Etobicoke Lakeshore All Candidates event on what will probably be one of the few warm nights we have left. So thanks for spending it with us. Your presence demonstrates your civic commitment to making informed choices on Election Day, October 22nd. I believe this is the only all candidates meeting for a councillor in this ward, in what is our new ward, Ward 3. Before we get started, we would like to do a land acknowledgement, and Jasmine will go ahead.
It is customary to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional and ancestral lands of Aboriginal peoples at the beginning of meetings. This evening, we would like to acknowledge that the Assembly Hall is situated upon the traditional territories of the Ojibwe and the Anishinaabe people who named this land Etobicoke. Others include the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations and the Métis Nation. As well, we are committed to reconciliation and the restoration of identity. We value and respect the distinct contributions of the First Peoples of Canada.
We will get started right away, and I'd like to start with our ground rules, our guidelines for our meeting tonight. And for us to get the most out of tonight's meeting, we ask that we maintain a respectful discourse. We ask that of our candidates on stage, and we ask that of our community members in the audience. If for some reason we veer off from that, I will put a pause on things and try to bring us back to why we're actually here, to meet our candidates, to hear their platforms, to learn about what they will be able to help us with as citizens, and to make informed decisions at the polls October 22nd. So I will put a pause on things and try to rein us back in. In this unconventional election, it is, I guess, I'll call it a passionate time in politics, and lots of strong feelings, and we want people to express themselves. However, we do ask that you keep it respectful. We can all agree to that? Yes? Thank you. So, the format of tonight's meeting will be as follows. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to introduce themselves. Please note that in order to manage our time and to get as many questions in as possible, we will be strict with timekeeping. Dornell is over here, and Dornell will be our timekeeper in the front row here, and he will hold up this sign that you can't miss, the orange sign indicating you've got 30 seconds left to respond to the question. After that sign, when your time is up, you will hear a bell. Thank you, Dornell. And that means that's your absolute cutoff for wrapping up your question, okay? We want to get as many questions in, so let's try to keep to that. For community members asking questions, please remember to keep your questions brief and to the point. We will have one question put forward by one of the groups, one of the organizing groups, and I've got those pre-written questions here. And we will alternate. Once that question is asked, we will have community members on a mic on either end of the room here, and we'll have 2 questions, and then we'll ask another pre-written question from one of the organizing groups. We will continue with that format until we get through as many questions as we can, and at approximately 9:15, we will wrap up the question period and give the candidates an opportunity to give their last remarks. Okay? As well, we have some resource sheets for you with all the Etobicoke Lakeshore Councillor candidates' names and their contact information so that you can follow up with them directly if there are any outstanding issues you'd like to discuss. Now, I know we have some notable absences. We have 10 councillor candidates in this ward, and as you'll note, not all of them are here. And so we are going to be respectful to the candidates who have come out tonight to share with us and speak to them about their platforms. I'm sorry, but I have no answer to the question that was asked earlier about Mark Grimes not being here. Okay, so thank you all for coming, and we will get started. So, to save some time for questions, what I'm going to do is start by introducing our first candidate and asking our first question. So they will introduce themselves and answer the question. And then the next candidate will do the same, okay? All right, so the question that we are going to do first. What would you do to fast-track planning and permit approvals and use city-owned land to expand Toronto's affordable and supportive housing stock? We are going to start with Iain Davis. Please introduce yourself and follow up with a question with an answer.
Hi there, my name is Iain Davis, and I've been an Etobicoke resident for the past 25 years. And walking here today, I actually crossed paths with my high school, which was Father John Redmond High School. But I want to do something different tonight, so bear with me if you can, because we're going to go mobile for a second, if that's okay. Because I have 3 questions that I want to ask you guys, and I need your support. I need you guys to work with me, including the people on the panel. Show of hands. Who here believes that our current city councillor has got to go? Okay, good. Number 2, who believes that we need a councillor who is willing to stand up to developers, who is willing to work for the community and not for developers? Show of hands. Who believes that? And the third question. Who here believes that housing in the city of Toronto, in our community, rental and home owners, who believes that housing in the city is too high? Okay, that's why I'm running. I'm running because these are the issues that matter to me, but these are also the issues that matter to us. These are the issues that matter to our community, and it is time for us to work together. It is time for us to come together to fix these problems. And we can only do that if we work together. So, the question was about housing affordability. I have released a comprehensive plan on housing affordability, which is downstairs in the lobby. If there are no copies left, clearly it was popular. If not, check the website. Now, one of the hallmarks of our plan is to increase the supply of housing. It's to deal with Toronto community housing, which is mismanaged, and to deal with property taxes and how we are taxing property owners in the city. Now, more specifically, about housing affordability and affordable housing. We have thousands of units in Toronto community housing that are empty. They are not being used because they are not livable. So before we start talking about building new housing, let's fix the housing we already have. Now, with regards to new housing initiatives, LAMP. Thank you so much for hosting this, but you guys need a new building. A new purpose-built building that serves the role that you were intended, serving the community medically, socially. In our city, we have such buildings. Why do we not have one here? My encouragement is to work with the province to get a brand new building purpose-built for LAMP so that they can service the community better, more effectively, more efficiently, and to use that new available land to redevelop. Thank you so much.
Please go ahead. Okay, so I just have a quick question, which is, when do we get to do our opening statements?
Yes, so introduce yourself and then respond to the question.
Okay. So I'll do my opening statement first. So good evening, everybody. And first of all, many thanks to LAMP for organizing this event. My name is Pamela Gough, and I am your public school trustee for Etobicoke Lakeshore. I've served for 8 years here as the TDSB trustee, and a previous 3 terms, or 9 years, with the Etobicoke board. So I have a total of 17 years of elected service in Etobicoke Lakeshore, which is longer than the incumbent, Mark Grimes. I'm the only person on the ballot who has elected experience in both Ward 5 and Ward 6. And this means I have a unique record of elected service in all of the new Ward 3 that none of the others on the ballot can match. I am known as an award-winning civic leader who's listened to our community and has taken action to make Etobicoke Lakeshore a better place, especially in terms of road safety and livable, walkable communities. So what have I done? As a trustee, I've done a lot to make a difference. We now have, in Etobicoke, a Lakeshore-based gifted program for our public school students at Lanyon. We have 2 new early immersion programs. Lakeshore Collegiate now has a very challenging and academic advanced placement program, and many school grounds have been revitalized. Overcrowding at Norseman has been addressed. But the thing I'm proudest of is my record on road safety. I have pulled the City of Toronto's Vision Zero road safety plan for school zones off the page and onto the radar screen in Toronto, and that means that children's lives are being saved every single day. If I could do this for schools as a trustee, imagine what I can do for you and the entire community as a councillor. Etobicoke Lakeshore, we're at a crossroads. We can continue with the status quo of unrestricted growth and development with little infrastructure, poor transit, congested roads, and dangerous streets where cyclists and pedestrians are killed or seriously injured regularly. Or we can choose a better way. My vision for a sustainable, livable, affordable, inspirational city where there is a place for all. And I ask you to choose the better way and choose me as your next councillor. So moving on to the question of fast-track planning and city permit approvals. So that's a really interesting question. So the first thing I would do as a councillor would be I would meet with my staff to figure out where in the ward the city-owned lands are, because this question is quite specific. It is, how would you do fast-track planning and permit approval on city-owned land to expand Toronto's affordable and supportive housing stock? So, was that the bell? Okay, well, at any rate, I'd work along that line to make sure that affordable housing was built using inclusionary zoning, more co-ops, and creative solutions for seniors to team up with the city and get subsidies to, for example, make legal basement apartments so that they could have some rent to supplement their pensions. There's all sorts of ideas.
Thank you. Robert, please introduce yourself, followed by the answer.
Good evening, and again, thank you, Lynn, for all doing this, and David, and it's always a pleasure. Point of me joining this debate, originally I came from downtown about 15 years ago to this East End. It's, compared to downtown living, this is an absolutely beautiful neighborhood. I'm sorry to be honest with you. And I stayed with it, and there's people been here and people have been working on it, and the big debates that were coming up over the last little while, people are asking questions, and I kept finding out that when you look at the math, the math generally wasn't working. noticed that, just to stare at it, most people were trying to absolutely keep each other happy and smile and nod rather than get things done. And I've never really worked in government, and I'll tell you straight up, as far as a smile and nod politician, that's definitely nowhere near where I'm at. To answer the first question, it's for the same reason I'm sitting here, which is we have to open dialogue, we have to start debate. Now, how do we get this housing thing going? We've had people promising us housing. I believe something like 10,000 units were promised in the last election. We got half that, and current mayor candidates and all that are pointing their fingers at each other, blaming at each other, and at the end of the day, as a representative of the people, I believe is the primary function of what we're supposed to be doing as a candidate. And I gotta stand up for the people, and we've got to stand up to people and turn around and just outright say to them, we need results out of our government services. It's not like I've got a magic answer. There's going to be 25 of us representing the whole city, and we need our government services to actually work functionally. We need councillors to have the ability to have accountability and say, hey, we've got nothing, but our payroll's been billions. What have you guys delivered? So again, that's basically it. We need someone to stand up for the people and say, we're paying all our money, we're paying all our taxes. We've got all these government services. We just need them to actually start producing something. And if they're not producing, hold them accountable and maybe find some people in city management that will. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Good evening. My name is Michael Julihen. I'm running for City Councillor for Etobicoke Lakeshore, Ward 3. I've taken many jobs in my life, and my last work was a screening officer at the Toronto International Airport for 2 years. It was a very interesting job, and I met a lot of people at the airport. I have an education. I went to university, two in fact, but I did not finish at both of them. I studied a little bit of accounting and purchasing. I've had an interest in politics for 2 decades. I've been writing to politicians, all 3 levels of government, for more than 20 years. So I've proven to myself that I have an interest in politics and in writing. So I decided, instead of writing to the politicians, I'm going to be there and do what I preach. If, of course, residents endorse me and elect me. And I believe that when you have an interest in politics like mine, you discover a lot about the government, all 3 levels of government in Canada, their intentions, their attitudes towards the people, through their policies, and specifically towards selected groups of people like the poor, the French of the province of Quebec, and the indigenous people. Those are the status quos of this country, meaning there's no change in attitude and in policies from all 3 governments. So, I want to mention that I've lived in Montreal, I've lived in Ottawa, and I've been in Toronto for the last 12 years. As for the first question, apparently Jennifer Kesmats says there's a lot of land to be released for affordable housing. So there's also a need for affordable houses with backyards to raise children. So I'd like to see that land that is available for Etobicoke Lakeshore and other ridings across the city. Apparently from Premier Doug Ford, the shovel hasn't been put in the ground for 4 years. So we need to see that happening as soon as the City Council resumes. This is why I will want to reunite, because I didn't see any housing being built. So this is why I will want to reunite the apartment building owners and ask them if they can accept a reduction in rent of 25% for their tenants. There's no cap here in Toronto for the rent compared to Montreal, where there's regulation. There's no cap here. So I want to reunite these apartment building owners, and I want to know if they can reduce their rent. It's like a reset button. It's too high. I've met people who have 2 jobs to make ends meet. It's very, very high compared to other cities. So apart from the apartment building owners, there's houses also. 1.2 million. Okay. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Thank you, Godone. Thank you you all for taking time out to come out and spend some time with all of us here tonight. I know we all appreciate it. My name is Amber Morley. I am a lifelong and deeply connected resident of this neighborhood. I'm very thrilled to be on this stage where I've spent many years in my adolescence organizing shows for community and mentoring and supporting young people in our neighborhoods to be their best, to share their talents, and to work together collaboratively. So that's something that I'm really excited about. I proudly often say that I'm the poster child of LAMP. I started volunteering there when I was 11 years old. I went on to create a job for myself there with the South Etobicoke Youth Assembly, and I ran that organization for over a decade. So I'm very proud of my work and my roots here in the community, and so that's a little bit about me. I started getting interested in politics when I was around that same age, around 11, 12 years old. Many of my peers were engaging with our local councillor, same councillor, is still in place. And I noticed that, or when I was first shown that I can have a voice as part of these conversations, and I saw my peers taking that on and standing up to represent many of us who felt like we didn't have voices, I think that was when the first excitement about politics and about civic engagement started for me. I went on to, as I say, work for many years at LAMP. In 2013, joined City Hall as council support staff to Peter Milchin in Ward 5, which is now our new neighbors in the northern part of our Ward 3, Etobicoke Lakeshore, in 25 wards. So I proudly served under Councillor Milchin, and I learned a lot from him, a seasoned councillor who was in place for over 20 years, and his complement of staff who also were very well-trained and well-versed in their work. So it was an incredible year of learning. I stuck around. Most recently, I've been working in John Campbell's office in Etobicoke Centre, Ward 4, as constituency assistant. So I'm very proud of the work that I was able to accomplish in that time and all of the learnings that happened there. I feel very ready to take my skills and my experience forward and my proven record of community advocacy and community building and to serve you all as the next councillor in Etobicoke Lakeshore. So that's my intro. With respect to the question on affordable housing, my mother raised my brother and I, shout out to you guys that are here tonight, right across the street, actually 13th Street, in a cooperative housing. And I know what an important and vital support that was for us to be able to thrive in this community and become civically minded, active residents here. So I would absolutely encourage more of the cooperative housing model, working as many of my peers here on the stage have mentioned vacant city land, activating that, working with Build Toronto, who stewards most of the city-owned land around the city, and seeing how we can collaborate to make best use of that. The last piece I'll just add, because my time has run out, is absolutely advocating through the planning process as the councillor to ensure that there are affordable units in all new developments. I would disagree that we're not building a lot right now. We're certainly building, we're just not building for the people. We're building for profit, and we're unfortunately leaving a lot of folks out. So that was
Good evening. My name is Peggy Moulder. In the words of Mayor Tory, Toronto City Government is broken with respect to how effectively it works for the people. It is broken both internally at City Hall, as stated by Mayor Tory, and externally with respect to public consultation. With a reduced number of city councillors, Toronto City Government is at a turning point, either for better or worse. My concern is that as procedures are forced to change, the interests of residents will take last place, while councillors and city staff juggle for positions of political influence and power. With a reduced number of city councillors, it is imperative that legislated resident community boards are established to ensure that taxpayers' community interests are protected by public servants and implemented by City Council. Legislated community boards will put the views of residents in the leading position for consideration by City Council and not at the tail end, as has often occurred over the past decade or so. Insanity is often described as doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Simply replacing the councillor will not solve the existing problems, since these stem from an ingrained failure of governance processes. I strongly believe that if you vote for any other candidate, residents will find themselves in the same position as today, or even worse off. I ask that you vote for me for positive action and change and a strategic vision for democracy and efficient governance for residents in Ward 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
With respect to the question, what would you do to fast-track planning and permit approvals and use city-owned land to expand Toronto's affordable and supportive housing stock? In 2019, the city will draft official plan inclusionary zoning policies for public consultation. Once the official plan inclusionary zoning policies come into effect, the city will be able to mandate affordable housing units as part of large residential developments. I do not agree with the proposition that planning and permit approvals are unduly slow. The process is a necessity, as it is in the public interest that projects comply with all legislation, including public safety. Where the city proposes to use its own land to build affordable housing units by hiring building contractors to do the construction work only, with the city retaining ownership of the land, the planning and permit process should flow smoothly. Once partnerships with the private sector are introduced, then it can be expected that negotiations will slow down the planning and approval process. There are many details to be worked out concerning mandated affordable housing, which will be discussed extensively during the public consultation process. I look forward as City Councillor to addressing all the important and relevant questions with practical and workable solutions.
Now, at this time, I'm going to invite any members of our audience to step up to either of the two mics if you've got a question, and we're going to take 2 questions from the community right now. So you can head to this mic, and that one as well. Okay, we'll take our first question on this side of the room.
Simple question. I appreciate all the candidates, but I would like Amber and Iain to articulate, one and then the other, how they're going to be an incumbent.
And Iain, we'll start with you.
I'll stay seated for this answer. Well, the first thing is showing up. Here's the thing. If you don't show up for a job interview, you don't get the job. Yeah. Simple as that. And you know, going door to door these past 3 months, I have heard it time and time again. People are ready for change. They're ready for new blood, and luckily we're bringing it. And you know what? Our local city councillor, he has a record that he can run on, and he has to answer to you, the resident, the voter, for why he has done what he has done. It is our job to give you an alternative, to give you a positive alternative that says, you know what? We're working for you and not for developers. We're working for your interests because you are our family, our community, and if you suffer, we suffer. And by showing up when it matters, because that's how you can tell who actually cares. Not when times are easy, but when times are tough. When you have to stand up here and take questions from ordinary, everyday citizens and you don't show up. That's how we are going to be an incumbent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. How do you beat an incumbent is a great question, and is a very, very, very difficult thing to do. For those of us who live in the political bubble, we'll know that incumbents have, a higher chance of retiring than being actually beaten by especially by a first-term candidate. And so we do have a challenge ahead of us. What I do like to think of myself as is pragmatic. When I decided to do this and I left my job at City Hall in January with lots of leeway ahead to plan, to rally my networks, to rally the troops, to build a team around me, and we've been very successful at doing that. We've gotten endorsements from Progress Toronto, from the NDP, from the Toronto Labour Council, and those have all resulted in a lot of people power and energy and people behind this More with Morley movement that we've created. So I knew all along I could never do it alone, that it would take a community, a united community, for us to really get change in our neighborhoods. And so I set off doing that in January. I'm very proud of everything my team and I have built together and of all of the folks who've rallied behind and are pushing me forward as the candidate for Etobicoke Lakeshore.
An opportunity for our other candidates to respond to the question. Pamela?
Well, again, I think someone asked me today how I would differentiate myself from Mark Grimes, and I said, well, for one thing, I'm going to be at the all candidates meeting tonight and not at the FERCAM. I think that sort of says it all. I have a long record at the TDSB of excellent attendance, not just at the TDSB board meetings, but at the many committee meetings that I sit on, one of which, for example, is the Aboriginal Community Advisory Committee, through which I was the trustee who brought the motion for the Indigenous acknowledgement that is now not only here, starting our proceedings tonight, but also the acknowledgement starts the day of every single school in the TDSB, and I am really proud of that. So I guess all I can say is you beat an incumbent through your record, through your hard work, through your passion for community, through your community engagement, through the work that you do every single day listening to people and helping them. And that's how I plan on beating an incumbent. Thank you.
Thank you. How do you beat an incumbent? Wow, as Amber said, there's a better chance they're going to retire usually, especially when you've got reducing words and half of them get to retire and the people that want to stay, stay. To bring it back to the discussion, how do you beat an incumbent? Usually the incumbents are in power. They've got the media for the years of their term of service. They've got it all before that. And as I was saying, that some people I was discussing before I came up here, the media right now has this mayoral debate down to about 2 topics, and you guys get to read newspapers and watch TV shows that tell you guys what to think all the time. The only way to really beat the incumbent is to actually change the conversation, which is why I'm here. If either of these guys win, at the end of the day, they're not going to be the person literally building a house. They're going to be the person representing you, and the same with me. If they're not going to be the person with the TTC that's going to be saying, hey, we need a new bus route, they're going to be calling the TTC. That's our job. So we have to change the conversation that the media is saying, that what we need to think versus what we need to do. What we need to do is we need to change, and we need to be responsible for ourselves and the people that we pay that are unelected in city positions, such as community housing that didn't build their stuff, or the TTC that is, constantly trying to figure out on how they're going to get a quote better service while cutting our service.
Thank you, Robert. Michael?
Well, how do you beat an incumbent? Is that thing working now?
Yep.
Working? Okay. How do you beat an incumbent? You have the power. You have the power to choose. You're the people who vote, and you make a sound decision on the information that each candidate presents to you. I have a platform. It's well written in my blog, in my website. My platform touches all of the city, all of the citizens of the city. It touches Toronto community housing. It touches transit. I want platform edge doors for the subway. We all remember the incident that happened in February of this year. People were packed like sardines on the subway. It was very dangerous. So we need platform edge doors. That's part of my platform. Toronto Community Housing has been using a deferred rent payment system, which is deplorable. I call it very, very bad, very bad. They take 3 months of income, and they take 2 months to inform the tenant that they're going to pay rent on income they've earned 5 months ago. For the poor, that's a no-go. I mean, they don't have the money 5 months later. I've been in contact with somebody at City Hall for this. I want change. I called her yesterday. I said, I'm not going to pay rent 5 months later. So you better change it. So you have the power to choose the right candidate. It's in your hands.
Thank you.
Sorry, I read an article in the newspaper a few days ago, and it said that the average CEO runs out of ideas after about 5 years and then surrounds themselves with yes people. It's up to the people, the residents of Toronto, to recognize that the longer somebody stays in as a councillor, that does not mean they get better and better at their job. And I repeat, the average CEO runs out of ideas after about 5 years. So in order to continue renewal and diversity on Toronto City Council, we need to introduce 2-term limits. So this, again, it's up to you, but you need to realize that doing the same thing over and over does not improve the situation. And the policy for 2-term limits is very simple. It's hereby declared to be the public policy of the City of Toronto to limit to not more than 8 consecutive years the time elected officials can serve as mayor or council member, so that elected representatives are citizen representatives who are responsive to the needs of the people and are not career politicians. So that's what I believe should be done, 2-term limits.
We are going to take our second question from the community on this side.
Thank you. This is for all candidates. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is David Maytuck. I'm a spokesperson for an organization called Vibrant Long Branch. And I want each of you to respond to a specific question. The first part is, do you agree and do you support the Long Branch Neighborhood Character Guidelines? Secondly, why? And thirdly, I'd like to hear your answer to the housing situation in a specific way, because many of you have talked about the fact that housing is an issue within Toronto and specifically in Ward 3, more specifically for me, in Long Branch. Part of the revitalization of Long Branch would be to revitalize the Lakeshore retail strip, which is frankly a disaster. Councillor Grimes has done nothing to promote the businesses along that strip. What would you do specifically to increase the businesses and the attractiveness of that area compared to something like Port Credit, which has a vibrant, very popular part of their city in Mississauga? And more specifically, what is your perspective on subdividing lots? Because there are families in this room tonight who Mark Grimes has written letters against, people who want to live in one house and have a family member live next door. And Mr. Grimes has written a letter of opposition to a family that wants to live beside another family member. So what's your position on all of these items?
Thank you for your question. Questions?
There's about 10. Sorry.
So there were many parts to that question. Keep in mind you still have the same amount of time. So, we are going to start on this end this time. Peggy, please go ahead.
Well, I am familiar with the Long Branch Urban Design Guidelines. I think they're very good. The purpose of them is to preserve the character of the neighborhood, along with the zoning bylaw. It's unfortunate if developers want to build subdivision-style homes and subdivide lots to build these subdivision-style homes. Unfortunately, I do not believe that they fit into the neighborhood. I am not against taking down an older home and building a new home. Duplexes are allowed. Second suites are allowed. But it has to be done within the urban design guidelines, it's about the appearance of the neighborhood, that we want good-looking neighborhoods. In fact, we want a good-looking city. So, yeah, that would be my position, that I support the official plan regulations that do not permit subdivision of lots, and the urban design guidelines that keep and preserve the character of the neighborhood.
Thank you for your question. You guys can hear me, right? Yeah. So with respect to the guidelines, I think they're important to make sure that we are able to maintain the characteristics, as Peggy spoke to, of our neighborhoods. Etobicoke is very unique, and I think we all live here and like to call it home for the reasons that we have a lot of green space, large lots, larger homes for the most part. I live in a town, I live in an apartment now, but not that I live in a home, but I appreciate the look and feel and vibe of Etobicoke, and I think it's important that we maintain that as best we can. That being said, as a millennial, as a young person in the city who's trying to stay in the city and afford to stay in the city, I appreciate the pressures on young families, especially to make their money work for them. And if in some instances, if dividing the lot and creating a secondary home in order to allow for a good quality of life for them, I think that also should not be out of the question. And so for my part, I have a lot of experience working on behalf of the councillors at the Committee of Adjustments. So I know a lot about that process and helping residents navigate that. And so I would take lot splitting applications on a case-by-case basis in consultation with the applicant as well as the surrounding neighborhood, and really look at that as closely as I could, again on a case-by-case basis, for whatever's best for that particular neighborhood or that street and the residents there.
As for the guidelines, I'm not familiar with them. For the family member living next to another family member, that's fine. That should be acceptable. I mean, that's okay. Your question is very complex. That's all I can say right now. I'd have to read it very, with time on hand. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Robert?
I think your name is David? Okay. First of all, if I can reiterate the painfully obvious, when we elect the councillor is actually supposed to represent you guys, and part of my opening statement was, I don't tell you guys what to think. So to appropriately respond to your question, what do I think if you guys in Long Branch have a fair amount of unanimity about which way you'd like it to go and be redeveloped? We should be helping you do that, not telling you what you can and cannot do. If you guys need to kind of, stick a second house on the same lot, it's your lot. Like, the entire premise is land ownership and places to live. That's what makes us voters. We should be doing that. And I really don't know what to say beyond, and it's the same thing as anybody in this room, unless you're really in a fight with someone else and asking me to break it up. It's not my job to break up your fights. If you and a bunch of other people want to come to me and say, hey, we got a great idea and this seems to be working everywhere and there's nobody complaining, why aren't we just doing it? And if we need to amend something at the city level in order for people to actually do what they want to do on their own property or with their own businesses or in their own area.
I'm very familiar with the history and character of Long Branch, the fact that it was originally a cottage community built in the villa style with many of the beautiful older homes there still being intact with their heritage flavor. It's given that whole corner of southwest Etobicoke a beautiful feel that I know the residents really cherish and want to preserve. And I totally understand that and want to do that too. I do think that the Long Branch Neighbourhood Guidelines are a great start in working within the overall framework of the master plan to try to preserve those aspects of the local flavour of Long Branch, those generous side yard setbacks, the front yard setbacks, the gables. All of these features are laid out in the Long Branch Guidelines. And as a councillor, I would encourage people to respect those guidelines. In terms of lot splitting, I know it's a huge issue in Long Branch. I know there's tremendous animosity towards the soldier houses, the long, narrow houses that are built side by side after the lot split split. I don't like them either. Again, we have to work within the official plan, and we have to guide the residents that want to, legitimately split their lot and build, homes for extended family next door. We have to work with them to have those homes in keeping with the character of the guidelines.
Thank you.
David, if I can just cut to the heart of your question, lot splitting. My issue with lot splitting is that it fails to fulfill the promises that it makes to you. It says that it's going to give you more housing and it's going to make housing more affordable. Not accurate. It actually makes housing unaffordable in our area. It puts at risk our green space, it puts at risk our trees, it puts unnecessary stress on our residential roads and communities, when instead we should be focusing our attention on intensifying main streets. Now, I've lived in this area for 25 years. It is easy to take for granted the fact that every road is lined with trees, with green space. The fact that we live by the waterfront is amazing. It's unlike anywhere else in the city. And unfortunately, the moment we start letting developers come in, buy lots, split them in half, put 2 houses on them and sell them to the highest bidder, you lose your neighborhood. Now, I'm not against developers. I want to work with developers, not for them. Now, the city has an official plan. Let's stick to the plan. The plan is to keep the character and the aspect of what it is to be a part of Long Branch, to not let it get destroyed or ruined, to be taken and made into something that it's not. This is our neighborhood. Let's protect it. Let's fight for the official plan, and when necessary, there can be adjustments. But we shouldn't have a situation when the plan is thrown to the wayside and abandoned by our city councilor. So as your councilor, I will fight to make sure that the plan is enforced.
We're going to go back to one of our pre-written questions. Given you will be responsible for representing over 129,000 people, can you provide some specific strategies for how you will ensure you stay connected to this population and that their voices are heard? And we'll start on this end of the table with you, Iain.
Would you like to meet Pam?
No, Iain.
All right, well, the first thing is that we actually have a ward that has about as many residents as PEI. Okay, so first of all, we need a full-time city councilor who shows up to work, who shows up to make sure that votes are cast, to make sure that your voice is heard at City Hall. That's the first thing. The second thing is I believe in a community service mentality. Not customer service, community service. Because you're not the customer and I am not a business owner. We are a community. We have to work together to solve our problems. So let's work together to get things done. Now, what I believe is that because our ward is now the same size as the MPPs and the MPs, we here need a constituency office. We need a space where you can come in, say hello to your local city councilor, sit down and say, you know what? I have some problems. We need some speed bumps on our road. We have some issues because lots are being splitted right across the way. We have some issues because there's no affordable housing for us. The TTC isn't working for me. What are you going to do about it? Let's bring the distance between the councillor and the resident closer, not further apart. Let's not let the 129,000 resident versus 1 city councillor ratio get away from us. We can do it together, but we need to have a councillor who is determined and committed to working with you.
it's a great question, and I would just make the point that the situation that we're in now is really not of our own choosing, and that is very unfortunate. But I will leave my opinion on Bill 5 on the floor. So we do have a challenge awaiting us in that we will have, one councillor for basically twice the area. As a trustee, of course, I currently do represent the entire area, so I do have, to some extent, a lot of familiarity in how to, techniques to keep in touch with the community, and I'm really proud of my record in having done that. I put out regular newsletters that I write myself. They're highly detailed, and they're aimed at making people aware of what's going on in ways that matter to them. I'm also very fond of going to community meetings, which I do very regularly in person, and I answer my own phone calls a lot, as much as I can. As a councillor, I will have staff, which I don't at the TDSB, not on a regular full-time basis at any rate. So that would be a great help. And I think obviously at City Hall we're going to have to make some decisions in terms of staffing up, because the current staff ratios will basically have to be kept. The community depends on their councillors to offer them services for the things that matter most to them: roads, trees, sewage, just everything you see in your front door. Those are things that the city provides. So I'll be looking at setting up advisory councils. I'll be looking at having meet and greet coffee sessions in various parts of the ward, so I'll go out to the ward rather than them coming to me. And there is the possibility that we can set up some offices right in the community, which I would also be in favor of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pamela. Next, we will have Robert.
How to stay in better communication with the constituents is, again, one of the reasons we're here. Yes, I can completely agree now that we're in a much larger ward that, perhaps a local office, especially for those of us that can't commute downtown regularly, would be a good idea. Simple questions such as, 10-year-old technology, such as like maybe SurveyMonkey. We all get the emails and we get the mail outs, but how hard is it to include a link saying, hey, what do you guys think? If you guys want a constituency office, just let me know what you want. If you guys just want the mailings to include a link so that when you guys get a chance and you have 5 minutes to burn, you can send off a piece of your mind for review, let me know. But I can completely agree that we have to get back to the constituencies, the constituents as a whole, and they need to have much better communication with City Hall. And if it's through an office or through web or through just polling, or they need to see people more than once every 5 years.
Thank you very much. Michael, please go ahead.
To this question, I've written this answer. Residents will have the opportunity to send letters, email to the office, or to call. That's pretty much for 29,000 people. There's a lot of people to cater to. So, but if there's certain problems, only a small percentage or some of them will be able to call, and will be calling and sending email. There's also this pledge that I was asked to sign. So it says town hall type meetings organized by the Lakeshore Leaders Forum Committee and held 3 times a year during the term of the incoming city council, to which the local councillor will be invited. So I have pledged to be there and to listen. So 3 times a year, I mean, they don't put these pledges out for nothing, right? If it works, that's fine. That's fine. That's absolutely, if it's productive, that's okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Amber, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I believe I'm the only candidate on the panel, other than the incumbent, who has experience working on the floor of council and working on the second floor at City Hall, where all the councillors' offices are. So I have actually, as I mentioned, since 2013 been there learning. I've worked in multiple capacities in the councillor's office and have managed and maintained councillor's office with as little as 2 staff, myself and one other. So I'm very confident in my ability and my understanding of the way the city works and how best to serve residents. I'm quite proud of the time I've spent as a constituency assistant, helping residents navigate the city, sharing details with them about different applications or different developments, and helping them understand how they can weigh in and have a say on these different processes. So I've got a lot of experience hiring and training staff as well within the councillor's office. So I'm very confident in my ability on day one to get to work. I'm committed to having a local constituency office. I think it's very important that we're open and accessible as your leader. And I am constituency office, and I'm also thinking, depending on the complement of staff that council decides on as a result of this 25 ward change, that I might have 2 executive assistants, 1 for each of the old wards, so there's still a very main and direct point of contact, and so residents don't feel that much of a loss in terms of their ability to get through to somebody and have a point of contact. Of course, happy to continue to show up and be there for residents, but I will train my staff to ensure that they can do a lot of the work, which is what council staff do as it is. So I'm excited for the opportunity.
Peggy, please go ahead.
So the question might be, how do other large cities manage this problem, public consultation? New York City, the average district size, which is equivalent to a ward here, is 140,000 people. So in Etobicoke Lakeshore, we have approximately 129,000 people. In around 2013, I heard Paul Bedford, former chief planner of the City of Toronto, speak about community boards in New York City. And this is how they manage their public consultation. So I did some investigation. I have drafted legislation for community boards based on the New York City Charter. And recently, the Etobicoke Guardian printed an article providing a brief overview. So you can find these items on my website. As you're aware, I've been promoting the creation by the city of legislated resident-run community boards since 2014 to protect the democratic right of residents to participate and have input into City Toronto policies and decision-making. Fundamental to this right is that all meetings are public, inclusive, efficient, transparent, consensus-oriented, and follow the rule of law. In the interest of efficiency, residents will be encouraged to work together in groups or committees to consolidate their views and particularly write points down for discussion purposes. As residents will be invited to request public meetings with the councillor, all residents will be invited to request public meetings with the councillor on specific matters, and these public meetings will be conducted as expeditiously as possible. Minutes of the public meetings will be prepared for the public record, including presentation to city council members. This is my commitment to the public consultation process.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you to the Mimico Residents Association for that question. We are now going to take one question from this side of the room.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm a member of LAMP. My name is Thomas Cromie. My history on the Lakeshore has gone back, if not more than 50 years, with my family. With my family involved in the community, cleaning up the community, doing windows, garbage, snow plowing, landscaping, and any such thing. I've tried to voice my concern for the last 2 years. I haven't seen anything at all change. If I can refer to them growing up in the community and stuff, I don't know if you've noticed or if it's strange, like from you being 10 years old to 11 years old, it's so hard for me to explain. When you go out on the lakeshore on the weekend, I have like a dream. I want to go out on Saturday morning. I want to travel from 13th Street to McDonald's by Royal York. I don't want to see a cigarette butt. I don't want to see a water bottle. I don't want to see the city bypass it every single morning, just empty the garbage can. It's a little fine detail that I'm concerned with, because I swear for 2 years, I go up and down on my bike. I don't do it on purpose because I go out and I do things during the day. And the big stuff is, but the small detail, it's got to defer people from enjoying their time on the lakeshore. You know,
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm over here. I just wanted to ask you to stay by the mic. We just wanted you to ask the candidates a question so they can get to the answer.
Okay, what do you want to do to clean up the fine detail, whether it's 1 week or somebody's got to travel all together, something like one big cleanup and the shoreline too with the plastic debris? What are you willing to do about the fine detail in the city that brings us out to spend money and to enjoy with our families and feel so comfortable to walk around our community, you know, that we work so hard to upkeep? You know?
Thank you very much for that question. We are going to start with Peggy.
I know I sound like a broken record, but again, this is about community boards, where these types of issues, in fact, every issue, can be brought forward in a community. I know the BIA, the business improvement areas, have a lot to do with the sidewalks, the street lights, tree planting. They have a lot of input. But I agree, the standards in the city for a lot of things are set too low. And we need to raise our standards in the city. And I think standards can only be raised when people have input, when people can talk, when people can share ideas, where there's a forum for people to talk and share ideas. Right now, there's no forum. And again, this is what community boards will do. It will provide the forum where people can get together. And I think things like street improvements, the appearance, cleanliness, we can do all these things together. But right now, we are divided and separated. And again, community boards, legislated, will bring us together.
Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you for the question, Thomas, and for all that you do to keep the lakeshore clean. I'm one of those friends as well who my friends can't pollute in front of because I'll have their heads if they do. I appreciate your concern, and as you know, I've grown up on the lakeshore my whole life, and I've seen a lot of different things, including a lot of, lack of cleanliness. To Peggy's point, I totally agree. I think it's very important that we're activating and active participants with the local BIAs. The streetscapes and a lot of the garbage receptacles and things that are available there is part of the discussions with our transportation services group and the BIAs in consultation with the councillor's office. So the more that we do to invest in and activate those spaces and our community in general, getting people from south of the lakeshore and north of the lakeshore coming down, like to one of the points earlier about getting more businesses and incentivizing businesses and local residents to shop local. I think it's all an important part of the mix. Certainly communications campaigns around keeping the lakeshore clean is something that the city could take up. The other piece I didn't mention when we talked about how are we going to stay in touch with residents is that my educational background is public relations. So I think there's a lot of creative ways that we can just communicate with one another and also lead by example to start to really get to the heart of some of these issues.
Thank you. Michael, please go ahead.
So you're raising an issue, and I would have to look at what can be done about it, because frankly, I would have to look into what can be done to improve the situation. But raising the issue is great. That's fine. I mean, that's my answer.
Thank you very much, Michael. Robert?
Specific to your question about the removal of the garbage and debris that's around, as far as I'm aware, city taxes are already paying for garbage removal. I don't know if you guys have seen them in the room. I haven't seen them in the last little while. The little guys that literally drive around on the shop backs and just go suck stuff up on the street that somebody didn't bother to put in the garbage. If we're saying that we've got a constant and ongoing problem with garbage still being on the street, I want to find out where this dude is and if he's actually doing his job. Because I'm pretty sure I've seen him, and we've got a couple of those, quite a few of them in the city. And if he could maybe do his job and like vacuum up the garbage so the garbage people, because that's kind of why we're paying taxes, to give them a paycheck.
Thank you, Robert. Pamela, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you, Thomas, for the question. It's a great question. I understand really deeply the pride that we have as residents of Etobicoke Lakeshore in our beautiful natural setting. The proximity of the lake is truly unique, and it makes us very blessed to have it. We've got these amazing parks. We've got Sam Smith Park, we've got Humber Bay Park, East and West. All of those need to be cherished, and there has to be a lot of stewardship involved in the parks as well as the streets. My background is in environmental science. I have a Master's of Forestry from the University of Toronto. My specialty was ecology. I am all for clean communities. I'm all for stewardship of our beautiful parks. I have been involved for many years as a trustee in the community cleanups that happen as part of Clean Toronto Together. And actually, as part of my instigation, in the TDSB, we have a little contest going every year with all of the schools, all the 586 schools in the TDSB. They vie with each other to see how many schools in the same district can take part in community cleanups. So our schools and our school children are doing a lot of that, and I know that our citizens are as well. So that's the sort of the first part, which is actually sort of collecting the garbage. The second part is preventing the garbage from being there in the first place, and that really speaks to community pride. For that, we need to work obviously with the BIAs and the community associations and with all the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. Iain, please go ahead.
Thank you, Thomas. You waited patiently for so long to ask your question, and it's a good one, because if you love this area, then you care what it looks like. Not just because you're vain or anything like that, but it's not pleasant to walk down the street and see cigarette butts or for it to smell nasty. Well, the thing is that there are city staff that are responsible for making sure that our streets are clean. If you have city staff, they need to be proud of their work, to take pride in their work. Where they see a street that is dirty, they make it clean, and to encourage them when they do a good job. But I think there needs to be a change of mentality, which sees your job working for the city as something you should be proud of, working hard. But also, as for the issue that has already been raised about community cleanup dates, I think that it's a great thing that our community can come together to work together to make our space more beautiful. Because if you're working with one another, if we are working together to make our community clean, we are going to cherish it more. We're going to care about it more than if we get somebody else to do it and we just pay them. I think that it is a good time for us to come together as a community, to use it as an opportunity for us to get to know one another. In my church community, we schedule quarterly cleanup dates, and everybody's there and everybody's pulling their weight. I think that's something we should encourage and strengthen and promote even more than we are doing right now. Because this is our environment, we only get one chance at it. If you mess it up, there's no do-overs.
And we are going to take a question from this side of the room.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Marcello Lavalle. My question relates to the very first question that was asked this evening. I think you can remember what that was. It related to how do we defeat the incumbent. So my question is very simple. What is the position of each member on the panel, their position regarding term appointments? We've heard from one candidate already. I'd like to hear the others.
Thank you. Term appointments.
Can you just get clarification? Marcello, is it term limits or term appointments?
Term appointments.
Appointments.
Well, occupying an office for a period of time. We've heard from one candidate. I'd like to hear from the others.
Perfect. So term limits, I think, is where, yes. So what is your take on term limits for city councilors? Iain, we will start with you.
It is a scary thing when you have city councilors that last longer on city council than American presidents do. I think that it is fair and reasonable for us to say, you know what, if you want to be at city council, you need one term. Well, one term's not enough because you got to get used to the space, you got to know the people, and things take time to move. Okay, maybe 2 years, maybe 2 terms, sorry. Well, except for some of these projects take longer than that. Sometimes if you have a housing development project, that might take almost 5 or 6 or 7 years. I think that 3 terms is more than enough. And I think that 3 terms is enough for any individual who's concerned about their community to get involved, to create a system that serves the community, but also to encourage somebody new, somebody younger, to maybe try and run for public office. Because trust me, when you're in your 20s and you're looking at city councilors who are much, much older than you, and much more respectable than you think to yourself, how on earth could I ever be a city councilor? And that's one of the reasons why millennials don't vote, and that's one of the reasons why millennials don't get involved, because they think, what chance do we have? So I believe in term limits because it's fair, because it allows you to get in, do good work, get out and do something different, but also to allow for millennials and young people to feel like they too can be a part of the process.
So I am in favor of a 2-term limit. I think, I agree with many others. There needs to be a council that has a fair amount of experience. Experience really matters when you're an elected official, but it's unfortunate when we have a situation where incumbents are so entrenched that the rotation that's so good to have in terms of fresh faces, fresh ideas doesn't happen. I have found as a trustee, I am at the end of my 2nd term as a trustee, and I am now leaving it. I am making a bid to go on to council. And my experience as a trustee has been that those first 4 years, especially the first year, are an incredibly steep learning curve. It really takes 2 years in many ways to get to know all the people, all the systems that you need to know in a large organization, in my case the Toronto District School Board, in this case the city. But after that first term, you've really got a lot of that down pat, and the 2nd term in my experience is when you go out and you make change happen because you're all set to do that. You've got all the knowledge that you need to know who the players are and how the system works. After that 2nd term, it's my belief that you should pass the torch on to someone else and let that whole process begin again. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela.
Robert?
I can totally agree that term limits are definitely a good idea. As it was said earlier this evening, people start running out of ideas. Yes, we are supposed to be all working together, and I can also agree with the earlier comments that millennials feel that they're not going to go anywhere. Because let's be honest, to a millennial, 10 years is a very, 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 very long period of time that stretches back to their teenage years. Moving forward with that, if you guys want to see a 2-term limit or a 3-term limit, whatever you guys think is the voters, you guys tell me. As, again, councillor is supposed to be a representative of what you got. I'm in that neighborhood myself, unless you guys overwhelmingly tell me something else, or if you want to let the current guy run 25 years, hey, just tell me what you want.
Thank you, Robert. Michael?
It's a good idea. You can hear me? Yes. It's a good idea to have a 2-term limit. You have the power to change who's in that city council. You're the one who votes. I believe that when a person enters politics, it's because they have something to give. They're there to serve. They have ideas. It's fresh. It's new for the people. So that's the good part when a person enters politics. So a 2-term limit, sure. I mean, does it have to be drafted? Because, like I said, you have the power to change. You have the power to vote for somebody else. So that's it.
Thank you, Michael. Amber, please go ahead.
Thank you. I absolutely am a big believer in term limits. I think they need to be introduced on Toronto City Council, and I think that would be a huge part of the solution to minimizing the dysfunction and sort of the concerns around how long it takes to get things done at City Hall and sort of the direction that we're going as a city. I agree with Pamela as well. It does usually take 2 to 4 years to really get a good sense of the place and the work. And again, as I mentioned, I'm very proud of the work that I've done at City Hall and those relationships and that learning that I've already done. So I'm very ready to work on day one. I don't imagine wanting to serve more than 2 terms in office. I think when you do it right and you're showing up every day for residents and you're really putting, everything out there, it's exhausting and you can't please everyone. And it is a tall order to continue to do that work indefinitely, and I think to do it at a high level and in a quality way. So I'm a big believer in it. I think we need it, and I would certainly vote in favor of term limits for city councillors as your councillor.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you, please go ahead.
Well, since I brought up term limits to start with, obviously I support 2-term limits. I think a lot of the problems we have with the city, housing that's unaffordable, transit that we have no money to build, there's a lot of complacency and a lack of ideas and a loss of enthusiasm. So this idea of incumbents that are in until the day they die is not serving us. It's convenient when you say, well, I like the person, but it's not about liking the person. It's about getting good governance. And when the person runs out of ideas, and they've done their public service, it's a public service job, it's time for them to move on. And in fact, you can have it so that they move out for a year. You serve 2 limits, then you take a year off, and if people feel they really want this person back, they can get them back. But the idea is that they get out of city government, they get in the trenches with the rest of us, find out what it's really like, and then they can run again if they really want to.
Thank you. And at this time I will share with you another question, this time from the New Toronto Lakeshore Village Neighborhood Association. As councillor, how will you work to make immediate, meaningful transit improvements for South Etobicoke residents? Combining TTC and GO remains prohibitively expensive. The 508 service has been discontinued, and the still unreliable 501 service has a new forced transfer at the Humber Loop. A Park Lawn GO station and the Waterfront West LRT would be great, but they are unfunded and likely at least a decade away. What short-term improvements will you propose? I'm going to start on the other end with Peggy.
Comparatively speaking, South Etobicoke has better public transit options than many other areas of the city. Using TTC and GO, South Etobicoke residents can arrive downtown within an hour. Residents in other areas of the city have fewer public transit options, taking many hours to reach their destinations. New public transit alternatives rest on the keyword unfunded. The province of Ontario has a significant debt on which it pays $11 billion per year in interest. In comparison, the City of Toronto's annual budget is also $11 billion per year. Consequently, the limited dollars available for building new public transit infrastructure need to be wisely allocated. For instance, the one-stop Scarborough subway could be rerouted along the existing Scarborough LRT right-of-way, eliminating 5 kilometers of tunneling and saving billions of dollars in construction costs, which can be allocated to other transit infrastructure priorities. In this regard, I support uploading Toronto rapid transit projects like the Scarborough subway to the province through Metrolinx, including necessary consultation and coordination with Toronto Transit Commission's planning and operation of the TTC system of streetcars and buses. It is expected that the province through Metrolinx will take responsibility for the long-term 100 years planning and financing of mass rapid transit in Toronto.
Amber, please go ahead.
Sorry, I'm going to be annoying. Can you repeat the question? I just want to make sure.
Sure. As councillor, how will you work to make immediate, meaningful transit improvements for South Etobicoke residents? Combining TTC and GO remains prohibitively expensive. The 508 service has been discontinued, and the still unreliable 501 service has a new forced transfer at the Humber Loop. A Park Lawn GO station and a Waterfront West LRT would be great, but they are unfunded and likely at least a decade away. What short-term improvements will you propose?
Thank you. I apologize for that, and thank you for sharing. So the first thing I would do once elected to City Council would be to seek an appointment to the TTC, and that's not something that I can force, it's something that the mayor will decide. But I think that it's very important, as Peggy mentioned, we do have a lot of transit that runs through our neighborhoods. It's just not always serving us the best way that it can. So I'd want to have a front row seat at that table to ensure that we can prioritize transit and services in Etobicoke Lakeshore and ensure we're getting our fair share. Supplementing streetcar services with rapid express bus routes would be something that I would be very keen to look into. I know I've heard at the doors when folks have talked about the track work happening that the bus service was more reliable and way faster anyways. So I think a mix and a combination of reliable, efficient services is what our neighborhood wants. I know I've lived at 13th Street and Lakeshore, as I mentioned, and traveling into downtown on the streetcar over the last number of years has gotten more and more impossible. I actually ended up purchasing a vehicle, which didn't really help because then you're sitting on the road as opposed to sitting in transit. And so we definitely need to get busy. We need to have councillors who ride the TTC who appreciate that a forced stop at the Humber Loop is so inconvenient and completely unnecessary. And so I think we need to just really make sure that we're present, we're active, we're working on getting as much more supplementary services in the interim until we get to more long-term solutions. And that would also look like advocating to moving our waterfront LRT up on the city's priority list, as we have such a hugely densified population, especially in Humber Bay Shores. We need to get people moving. And so I think there's a case to be made with the city to move that up on the priority list and to get some funding allocated. Thank you, Amber. Michael, go ahead.
I would have to look at this. I don't have all the information. I don't have all the details. I mean, the question is well written, but I mean, I'd really have to look, at how many people ride this, a service line, and so in terms of short-term improvements, you can always add streetcars and buses to service the need of the residents on a short-term basis. But like I said, if the problem is more complex, then we'll have to look at it with time. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Robert, please go ahead.
This was a fun one for me when I first saw it. First I had to figure out that they discontinued it in forced loop. That was annoying. Yeah. Moving forward with that, again, I've been in the Mimico neighborhood for 15 years. When I moved to the Mimico neighborhood, it got known to me that, within the 10-year plan, we're going to have the new LRT running across, and it's been 15. I'm kind of wondering where it is. Any of you guys that are also old enough to remember the last federal election, some of the campaign stuff that was coming out, that the old Christie Pitts stuff, Park Lawn, is going to be used for transit infrastructure in a giant hub. We're going to get a GO station and a whole lot of buses, and I'm seeing about as much going on there as I am on this LRT thing that we've been talking about for probably 20 years. If we could maybe make some calls and start finding out that if the province wants to start running this, are they going to give us service? If the feds are going to promise us money, are they going to give us the money? If somebody's going to put a plan in motion and do all the stuff and pay all the committees and pay all the workers to do their stuff and give us a report saying, okay, in 10 years we're going to have our harbourfront LRT extended, or if we're going to get our own, or why are we paying people and not getting any results? And as a representative, I've got this novel idea of going in and saying, hey, our property taxes are going up because as a percentage and our house values are going up, and now we're paying out the butt. Could we maybe get the same services we had 10 years ago?
Thank you, Robert. Pamela?
Thank you. I found the question to be a really interesting one. Public transit is incredibly important to me. I do ride public transit. As a TDSB trustee, I always take the subway to go up to the North York Civic Centre where the board meets, and my Metro Pass gets frayed by about the second week into every month. I love public transit, I love the TDC, and I love the subway. Here in the Lakeshore, we've got several really good long-term plans. We've got the Waterfront Transit Network Plan that the TTC and Waterfront Toronto put together. It's been approved by council, but it's still a long way away from being realized. We also have the Park Lawn Lakeshore Transportation Master Plan. Again, an excellent plan with its its move towards increasing investment in not just public transit, but increased pedestrianism and cycling networks. All of those are part of a long-term solution. But the question is all about what are your immediate ideas? So I addressed that. Given the fact, however, that transit does take place in a very long-term framework, there aren't a lot of really quick fixes, unfortunately. But I would say that the 501 streetcar does need to have more efficient service. And practically one of the ways that we can look at doing that is by reducing the number of short turns that happen at Roncesvalles so that more of the streetcars go right through the Humber Loop and through to the Long Branch Loop. The 145 Express is really useful, but the fare is a double fare. It should be just a single fare. And if it was, there'd probably be more people riding it, and then it would be able to run more often. At any rate, there's some of my ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I am a transit user. I've had to rely on public transit to get to my school, to my university at Bayview and Steeles, where I had a commute time of 1 hour and 45 minutes one way, and to get to work for the past 7 years. So I'm not speaking to you as somebody who's occasionally used the streetcar once or twice. I'm talking to somebody who's had to rely on it and has had it fail me more times than I'd like to acknowledge. Now, the priority for the TTC in the short term and the long term is the actual same. It has to be quality of service and reliability. If the TTC is not reliable enough for you to be able to count on it, then you will not use it. People will vote with their feet and take their cars instead of taking public transit. That is unacceptable because we have a transit system already. Let's work to make sure that it's more reliable, that offers better quality service, because otherwise we're going to have more congestion on the roads, and that's not appropriate. Now, on more citywide issues, I do not support a one-stop express stop subway line to Scarborough. I think it is a colossal waste of money, and we can be taking that money and putting it into improving service here and anywhere else in the city. Instead, we're wasting it on an idea that doesn't work, that the experts say doesn't work. And last, I think we need to look locally at buses, not streetcars on the Lakeshore, at least from the Long Branch Loop all the way to the Humber Bay Loop. Because buses, as has been already mentioned, are more efficient, they're faster, better quality of service, they work better. They don't take up as many lanes. Buses are better. Let's move towards having buses on the Lakeshore and not streetcars.
Thank you, Iain. Thank you for waiting so patiently. We're going to take a question from a community member over here.
Hi. It's loud. My name is Inga. I'm a resident of Etobicoke. I'm a grad student interested in social policy, and I'm also a victim of affordable housing, or actually the lack of affordable housing. So I want to bring the discussion back to affordable housing. Apologies for that. So unfortunately, the problem with affordable housing is not just limited to community-based housing or to subsidized housing. It's much broader. It has to do with the private sector, as some of you have noticed and mentioned. Today, low-income households and middle-income households are being displaced because private landowners have been increasing rent substantially. So they're using mild cosmetic renovations to justify a substantial increase in rent by $300 to $600 per month, right? So if someone's paying $1,000, it's now $1,400. So this is putting low-income households and middle-income households in a very, very precarious situation where they're restricted in their mobility, right? Freedom to look for other rent. So someone has said that a discussion, a dialogue has to be opened up with the private sector.
I have to interrupt you. I'm going to encourage you to ask a question so we can make
Okay, so I'm skeptical on that account, but I do wonder what are the measures that you are willing to take to open up this dialogue. Someone said that a cap needs to be introduced, so how do you see that happening? And also I believe in stringent regulation, and do you see that, and would you uphold that if you get elected? And also there is an issue of harassment. Landowners are forcing in various ways tenants that are locked in to the old price out of their house or out of their apartment units today. So I'm wondering, they don't feel secured. They can't often revert to legal aid because they're a couple dollars over the income level. So I'm wondering, how would you address this issue?
Thank you for your question. Yes, a few questions. So we will start on this end of the table with Peggy.
Okay, again, that was a multifaceted question. I do believe in rent control. I believe when someone leaves there or gives up their tenancy, that the landlord should not be able to increase the rent beyond the existing rent control rent. We have limited rental units available, so I do believe in rent control. With respect to a dialogue, I go back again to community boards. You can bring up any question. This can also be brought up during the public consultation on the mandated affordable housing. This will come up next year. So you can bring up all these questions, because what is mandated affordable housing? What is affordable housing? Is it rental? Who's going to own the affordable housing? How is it going to be governed? So these are very important questions. With respect to affordable housing, I believe rental should be the priority. It can also apply to lower purchase prices, and it will all be based on income. That your housing costs should not be more than 30% of your income. So it should all be based on income.
Thank you, Peggy. Amber?
Thank you, Inga, for the question. And I appreciate the concern and the struggle. Many of my peers are in the exact situation, these rent evictions, as this seems to be a new term that's been coined, with landlords raising the prices ridiculously. And unfortunately, not everyone is subject to rental guidelines or rental increase guidelines. So I think that's the first step. I agree with Peggy on that. We definitely need to have rent control in place. That needs to be a multi-government effort. So the provincial government needs to come down with some firm regulations around this piece as well, so that the city can then implement and enforce them. I think there's also a lot more work to be done in terms of advocating for a definition of affordability. So often you say, oh, we need affordable housing, and people immediately jump to social housing or to TCH housing or other things of that nature. And really, again, to Peggy mentioned, but this can also mean affordable homes that people can actually afford to buy. And so for different income brackets, affordability looks different, but I think that we need to, as a city, better define that and make it very clear, and then work in conjunction with our provincial counterparts to ensure that the appropriate regulations for rent control are in place, and that we as councillors are ensuring that landlords, property managers, and others are respecting that, and that tenant rights are also being respected.
Thank you. Michael, if we can hear from you.
We definitely need a cap, a maximum on the amount of rent that can be charged to a tenant. Well, why are they charging $1,000, $1,200 for $1,400? And there's not approval from the board. So he knows more than me. Okay, so we need regulations. Okay, so an idea of mine is to unite the building owners and try to them to accept to lower their rents by 25%. Is that going to be possible? I don't know, because it's already high. It's already too high. I've learned that the apartment building, when they build an apartment building, they're in a hurry to pay their mortgage, and they want to pay everything within 5 years. So after that, it's all sort of net profit. But this has to be, there's got to be some regulations. There's got to be some regulations for the rent. I mean, no more than the inflation rate of the year, to increase the rent. So that's an idea. But I'm interested in getting those guys to sit down at the table and see if they're ready to reduce their rent, just for everybody's sake.
Thank you, Michael. Robert?
This for me is kind of like a math question. I agree with the guy in the audience. Yeah, the board just approves it. You fill in your paperwork on the owner property and allows you to go right over guidelines, and all you got to do is stick in windows or something like that, which is great. They do cost money, but they eventually do get paid for, and you get to keep your rent increase later. And so now you're collecting money on money, which is great. Vancouver had a problem with this. They moved in financial circles. They realized that the international money was just gobbling up, and if somebody will pay a price, somebody will grab it. Vancouver shut that down, and obviously that money came to Toronto, since overseas money was used to now shopping in Toronto. New Zealand would shut it down real fast. They shut it down with a 25% surtax on foreign ownership. That shut it down real fast, and housing started getting affordable to people real good again. We need to look at what's going on globally in foreign countries and out of our own country, and start finding those solutions with some actual severity. Because as the guy said, the board will just approve it. When that expense is paid off, they get to keep the money. The newer properties, the board doesn't even get to. They can do whatever they want past a certain year, as far as I know. You guys are taxpayers. If you guys want a foreign ownership surtax, let me know. If you guys got other ideas that'll financially work, let me know. But you guys should be buying the houses, not some dude in Singapore with a whole lot of money.
Pamela?
Thank you very much for the question. It's a really difficult question. I am very aware of the rent eviction situation, and I have had friends who have been in that situation themselves. If this was a simple problem, it would have been solved already. This is one of Toronto's most major problems. Housing affordability is deeply entrenched in the private sector, and controlling it through public policy mechanisms has proven to be incredibly difficult, which is not to say that we shouldn't do it. I think we do need to use inclusionary zoning, as I mentioned before, to ensure that in new developments a certain percentage is affordable in terms of being at 30% of income or less. I think the city needs to have a public policy framework around increasing our rental housing stock, and that can be done in a variety of ways through incentives. There's a variety of ways that we can approach this problem. None of them are easy. All of them are incredibly delicate. But I think ultimately the city has to take its responsibility very seriously to create a real framework for affordable housing that they can actually stick to create a certain number of units per year or per 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Iain?
It's Inga, right? Okay. If you're being harassed by your landlord, then you need somebody who's going to stick up for you. You need somebody who's going to fight for you, who's going to be going to their office and saying what you're doing is 100% unacceptable and not welcome in our area. If you do not have that, then that is the role your city councilor should be playing for you. Because it is unacceptable for residents, paying residents, to being taken advantage of by landlords. First thing, we need a councilor who's willing to stand up for the residents. If that's not happening, that's got to change. Second of all, our property tax mill rate actually places an overly high burden on rental housing, which means that they get charged a higher rate for their property taxes than homeowners. They take that extra that they're charged and they put it on to you. Now, one of our plans is actually to harmonize the mill rate, which means that they're going to be charged about the same rate for property taxes. Now, you might think, wait a second, they're just going to pocket the money for themselves. Except for, the difference is that the City of Toronto will actually they are mandated to pass the savings on to you. If their property tax rates go down by 2.5%, they're legally obligated to pass it on to you. And if they don't, the city has to step in. That's what we're going to do. If we increase the supply of affordable housing or housing in general, the price of housing will decrease. That will give yourself additional options. Now, you may be in a situation where you can't afford to move anywhere else, but if we build more housing, that will change. We need an advocate for you, somebody who's going to stick up for you, and I am that advocate.
Thank you, Iain. And we are going to take a question.
I'll step up from behind the wall. My name is Carmen. I'm a long-term Etobicoke resident. And my question relates to the Legion Road extension, the $50 million Legion Road extension. I understand that the incumbent Mark Grimes has thrown his support behind this 300-meter section of road. My question to you is, do you support this extension? And if not, what would you do in Etobicoke South as better use for $50 million of taxpayer money? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Iain, let's start with you.
If you have been driving at rush hour in Humber Bay Shores near Parkland and Lakeshore, you know that congestion is no joke down there. And there is no solution on the way except for what the gentleman just mentioned. That is a solution that will ease congestion. By extending Legion Road all the way down, we actually will be able to ease congestion for the area, for the residents. Now, there are thousands of people in Humber Bay Shores, and more thousands are on the way with the development of the new towers. Now, if we don't get on this quickly, if we don't work to extend Legion Road, then that means more cars, which means more congestion, which means that their quality of life, the quality of life for people in Humber Bay Shores will be decreasing. That is unacceptable. I think that is a fair use of $50 million. In fact, it should have been done easily a decade ago. The fact that it's taking this long is unacceptable. But that being said, by all means, my full support.
Well, I would have to look at the situation really carefully to see whether this extension that will cost $50 million is actually justified or not. I don't know. I would say that if it's a one-off solution to try to ease the congestion in Humber Bay Shores, that there are many other things aside from a road extension that need to be done to ease the congestion. Most of that revolves around much better public transit and a public transit hub right in the area of Humber Bay Shores, which is a community that was allowed to grow like topsy without any planning for infrastructure being done. There are no schools in the area, there is no community center in the area, there's no library in the area. And of course, transit is desperately needed. Is the extension worth it or not? I don't have an opinion on that at this point. I'd really have to look into the details. I'd be willing to look into that. My overall sense is public transit is probably a better solution than a road extension. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. Robert?
Yeah, as a Mimico resident, as I pointed out earlier, yeah, that's a disaster over at Park Lawn. Like, there's really no other way to do it. As Iain just mentioned, and I mentioned in my last statement, the feds really aren't coming through with this transit hub, and we've got new towers going up in Christie. So the transportation isn't about to happen. We're going to get more people in a problem that we already have. I'm just trying to figure out if it's going to cost us $1 billion to build a subway, one stop, but a good distance through Scarborough, why is it going to cost us $50 million to build 300 meters of road? Like, something's up. We need to find better contractors, because if you can dig a hole for like kilometers and you need 5% of that budget to like pave 300 meters and maybe run some pipes down either side of it, the math just isn't working out in my head.
Thank you, Robert. Michael?
I'm not aware of the Legion Road extension. So, really, I'm not. So, 300 meters of section of road for $50 million, that's a lot of money.
unfortunately not informed on this particular initiative, so I would certainly want to look at it before I could give more of an informed answer to your question, Carmen. Thank you for that. But I do agree that there are much bigger like moving people through the Humber Bay Shores community is a huge priority. I think this council in general has a history of big ticket items that aren't always the most efficient, creative, or thought out or evidence-based decisions. And I think that we really need to make sure that we're evaluating all of the facts in front of us, looking at how many people's quality of life would this improve, and are there some outside of the box solutions like Transit Hub, which is absolutely needed in that neighborhood, or even redirecting some of those funds. $50 million is a lot of money. We could build a full service community center for half that on the Christie site. That would be employment, that would be, again, services and improving the quality of life for the residents in the neighborhood. So I think we really need to look at our priorities and also the evidence in front of us and decide what kind of a community we want to build moving forward, and not just continue to build buildings and roads, but also the infrastructure that's required for people to have good quality of lives here.
Thank you, Pamela. Peggy, please go ahead.
I've heard this idea. It's been floating around for a while. I'm not aware of any older reports. I'm not aware of any recent reports from city staff on details for this project, and I'm not aware of any public consultation that is taking place. So I can't have an opinion until we get the details and have a public consultation and go from there.
Thank you, Peggy. And I'm going to move on to our last question here that was pre-written. And this comes from the Mimico Lakeshore Community Network. A broad-based group of community organizations is planning to organize town hall type meetings in Etobicoke Lakeshore 3 times a year during the term of the incoming city council. Will you give an undertaking to attend those meetings in person if you are elected as our councillor? And Peggy, we'll start with you.
I believe I have answered this question in detail. I believe all meetings should be arranged through the councillor's office and will be meetings that are public, inclusive, efficient, transparent, consensus-oriented, and are to address specific issues. It is anticipated that there will be many more than 3 public meetings required per year. Minutes of all the public meetings will be prepared for the public record, and this is my commitment to the public consultation process. Bearing in mind that we're going to have a population in Ward 3 of 129,000, that we need to function efficiently when it comes to public consultation, and again, all meetings with the councillor need to be public and inclusive. I'm not particularly in favor of private meetings. We're not happy when developers have private meetings with councillors, and I think that it's better to have public meetings, that everyone is treated equally, that everybody has an opportunity, that it's 100% democratic, and nobody gets a foothold ahead of anybody else.
Thank you, Peggy.
I think for me, I'm not obviously a politician yet. Hopefully with your trust, I will be soon. But I think for me, my politics is more my process. And my process is about putting the voice of the community at the center of decision making. So this is absolutely the exact kind of way that we do that, is having robust communications and open town halls with stakeholders who are actively doing the work in the communities, who know the residents, who know the issues, who know the needs, and who can help me do my job to the best of my ability as a councillor. So certainly this is something I've signed the pledge. If it hasn't been received yet, it's on the way. But I'm very excited about this opportunity, and I think to Peggy's point and a lot of her platform around community councils, this is a really great informal and in some senses way that we can get started on developing our own local community councils and stakeholder groups. And I think that that's a real important priority, especially now in 25 wards. The community's voice needs to continue to be at the center, or needs to be brought back to the center of decision making.
Thank you, Amber. Michael?
That's the pledge. 3 times a year. And I signed it, and I sent it back. So, of course, I'll be learning of the issues that exist in Etobicoke. I don't know all the issues. So my platform is general. But that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Robert?
Obviously, understandably, my response to that question should be a resounding yes. And 3, I agree with the previously stated position as definitely inadequate. A petitioner or an elected representative should at least be in an open forum at least once a month with you guys, just to answer some Q&A. As other people have mentioned, and I said in an earlier response as well, people disappearing for 5 years doesn't work. People not interacting with you except for when I'm there to go shake some hands or something like that. There needs to be an open forum where people can show up prepared with their stats and ask some real questions. And I'm fully prepared to say, hey, you know what, I don't know it all, and I'm pretty sure nobody knows it all. And without that feedback from the community, how could anybody represent their community other than forward their own personal agenda? So.
Thank you, Robert. Pamela?
Thank you. Well, I could answer very simply with a resounding yes, but I will take a couple of seconds to expand on that. I deeply believe in the importance of community voice. I deeply believe that if citizens want to gather together in groups and have their councillor present, that should happen. If we want to have town hall meetings, the councillor should be there. It's in a sense the question, although it excites me, makes me also a little sad because it suggests that this is happening or there's a wish for it to happen right now and the councillor is not making himself available. And I find that a very unfortunate situation. As a trustee, I've organized town hall meetings, many of them myself. I had one of them last week on an education topic that's very hotly debated. And I was happy to see a number of people there. I was really happy to engage with the community and have the community engage with me and with the people that we're presenting. That's what it's all about, is that the local elected official needs to be in touch with the communities. The communities having a voice and being able to take the initiative to organize meetings like this is exactly what I would hope for. In fact, it would be almost like a dream come true. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I think it's embarrassing that we actually have to ask candidates for city council if they are going to show up to town hall meetings. Honestly, you choose a city councilor who works for you. If your boss calls you into his office and said, I want you there for 8 a.m., and you don't show up, you going to have a job? No, you're not. Attendance is not optional for events like these. And I think that it is easy to say, sure, we're going to go to 3 meetings during the year. But I'd actually like to expand that. Because currently we have hundreds of BIAs, neighborhood associations, school council meetings, we have condo association boards, ratepayer association boards, we have, churches that are around here, mosques. The city councilor needs to be involved in the community. Because each of us comes from a distinct neighborhood with different issues and needs. And if we have to wait until something goes wrong for us to figure it out as a city councilor, that's not proactive. And I like being proactive. The problems are easier to solve when they're smaller. If they're big, it's harder to solve them. So let's work together. Let's go to these town hall meetings. Let's have an open dialogue where you can ask your city councilor as tough a question as you want, and they have to stand there and say, well, this is what I've done, or this is what I haven't done. Let's give you the power to tell your city councilor that you don't like the job that they're doing.
Thank you, Iain. And now we are going to have a question from a community member. Go ahead.
All of you have spoken admirably about your involvement in the south part of this new ward. What is your knowledge about the issues facing the north part of this new ward? In particular, what is your vision for the area surrounding the approved Etobicoke Civic Center?
Thank you for your question. Iain, we will start with you.
Well, what I can tell you is that as a lifelong resident of Etobicoke, I've spent time north and south of the Queensway. And in fact, I find it admirable that north of the Queensway, you guys actually have traffic calming measures, unlike south of the Queensway. So, first off, I want to thank you guys for that, because going north actually saw what it's like to see traffic calming done properly. So first of all, thank you for that. Second of all, I'm not a resident of north of the riding. I come from Ward 6, this is my home. And I'm going to acknowledge that first of all because it's something that I want to work on. And I'd love for the opportunity to work with you and other people who are residents of the old Ward 5, which I'm never going to mention again because we are all one Ward 6, or Ward 3 now. See, there it goes again. Old patterns die hard. But as a member of the community, it is my responsibility as your city councillor to get involved, to spend the necessary time to get up to speed on the issues that matter most to you. And I promise that that is something that I will do going forward as your city councillor.
Thank you, Iain. Pamela?
Thank you very much for the question. I am really familiar with the area north of the Gardner as well as the area south of the Gardner, due to my experience of being a trustee that represents both sides. I am very familiar with the plans for the new Civic Center. I think they're really exciting. I think the architectural concept plan was absolutely phenomenal. I love the way they had an international contest for it. It's going to be a hub for that part of Etobicoke that very much needs it, an artistic center. We don't have an arts center of any sort of scope in Etobicoke. It's a chance for us to actually have a place for culture and the arts. I find that very exciting. The recreational possibilities, the fact that it's so proximate to the Kipling hub with all the transportation options that are going to be available there. It's a fantastic idea, and I very much look forward to seeing it move further towards completion. I'm also really familiar with many of the other issues of the former Ward 5, specifically the great concern that residents have there about overheight development. Development in the south part of Ward 3 and the old Ward 6 has in many ways been allowed to take place in an unmitigated way, in an unplanned way. And the residents of the area north of the Gardner are looking at what's happened here with a lot of fear that the same thing might happen to them there. So they need a councillor, they want a councillor who's ready to stand firm on regulating overheight development, allowing density around the transit hubs, as the official plan suggests. Is a great idea, it's very practical. But the height limits have to be kept at 6 stories along Blue Street. That's a major issue, particularly in the Sunny Lee Kingsway community. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. Robert?
I will admit I'm a former Ward 6 myself, now Ward 3. Hopefully we're all Ward 3. The stuff going on up north I'm not as familiar with as I am on the south. Sorry, the stuff up north, I'll be honest and tell you straight up, I'm not as familiar with it. Yeah, there's some development going up there. There's not a lot of stuff. The Civic Center stuff, I'm literally copying her answers, I'll be honest. I know it's a novel concept in politics, but there's a lot of people that know things that I don't necessarily do. If they're worried about getting the office towers we have on the Lakeshore, well, anybody that lived on the Lakeshore in Ward 6 is already more than aware that if you're like more than a block of it and you put a 20, 30-story tower between you and the water, you're not seeing anything much. So I can definitely totally understand their fears. I don't know what they're not going to see, but whatever it is, they're not going to see it. I might get some people calling saying, hey, can we put a 20-story tower there because I don't want to listen to buses driving around their transit hub. Now, again, and Iain's pointed out as well, and Amber pointed out as well, the big concept here is we need people that show up, and we need people that listen to residents, and we need people to stop telling the constituents what their opinion should be, and we need to start doing what, like, we need to behave as a representative, as a population at our seat.
Thank you, Robert. Michael?
look at this. I think you knew the answer already. I'm not aware of North Etobicoke. I don't. So I'll have to.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Amber?
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned, my first job in politics was working under Peter Milchin in the old Ward 5. So I was able to work with the BIA there. The preliminary plans for the 6 Points intersection redevelopment were being developed during my time in that office. So I had a number of angry phone calls and just general inquiries from folks about what's going to happen. They're going to tear up the road. It's going to be a nightmare. But I think, and to the question around the vision for the new Civic Center space and the old Westwood Theatre lands, is that they want it to be more of a complete street, a walkable neighborhood, and changing up that spaghetti intersection, as it used to be known as, and making those wide sidewalks, lots of lighting, lots of trees, and allowing people to feel safe to walk between to the transit hubs and other pieces that are being developed. That's important to that neighborhood, and I think it's going to make it more livable. I was really proud to do some work in the Stonegate community as they were working through their process to relocate to the new buildings that are replacing the old Stonegate Community Center. So I am familiar with pockets of the neighborhood. I know from working also in Etobicoke Center with John Campbell that largely the issues in those residential neighborhoods are traffic related and traffic calming related and those pieces. So I facilitated traffic calming processes on a number of occasions through the councillor's office. I have a lot of familiarity with that, and I'm very happy to continue to, again, to your point there, is listen to the residents in the neighborhoods about what they need and what they think is best, and then help facilitate through the city process to make that happen. Thank you, Amber. Peggy?
I was aware that there was this project underway, but I'm not familiar with the details. But my question in response to your question is, what do you think? And this is the role of the councillor to ask residents, what do you think? In my travels throughout the city, I've gone to lots of meetings, resident-type meetings on democracy and all different subjects. But the problems with concerning planning concern residents throughout the city. So even though I'm more familiar with what's going on in the old Ward 6, it doesn't mean that these problems in Ward 6 are unique. In fact, they are citywide. So that would be my question to residents. If you have a problem or concerns with any projects north of the Queensway, I'm prepared to do the research, read the reports, and work with you to solve the problems.
Just a time check, we are at 10 minutes after 9, so unfortunately we have time for only one more question, and our community member on this side is going to ask that question. My apologies to the people waiting, we are on a very tight timeline.
I just wanted to thank you all for physically being here and tackling some really divisive and challenging questions. My question relates to mental health and addiction. And I recognize that the provincial government currently has playing a large role in this issue right now. But with that caveat in mind, what is your stance on advocating for harm reduction initiatives, specifically supervised injection sites, that are currently in other wards, and other mental health initiatives that provide a safety net for those who are often overlooked, and I'd argue underserviced population?
Thank you for your question. Peggy, let's start with you.
Well, I'm not well versed on that topic. However, I am very sympathetic. I believe we have to do what's necessary to help people with these types of problems. They affect everyone in the end. They affect society. So I'm prepared to do whatever's necessary to provide what funding is necessary, to provide required facilities, and basically support people in need in the area of mental health.
Thank you very much. Amber?
Thank you for the question. I think this is a hugely important topic that's very much impacts every single one of us. I think we all probably know someone in our own lives and our families who have struggled with either mental health addiction or both. I know I certainly have, and it's something that I'm very deeply invested in addressing. I think there are things that the city can be doing to provide supportive programming, to advocate at all levels of government to ensure that we have the funding necessary to get busy on supportive housing, on the kinds of programs and supports that folks, especially folks that are low income, just aren't able to access on their own. It's something that I see every day on the Lakeshore, and it's part of our experience here, and it's definitely something that we as a government and as leaders need to get busy on. I was gonna add one other thing, and it's getting a little late, so my mind is lost on that, but I think, the other point I was gonna make was that the provincial government right now, unfortunately, is shown that they're not willing to support the safe injection sites, and I think that creates an opportunity that the city really needs to step up, because people are dying. Like, this is very serious, and the City of Toronto has a role to play, Toronto Public Health has a role to play, and if the province isn't prepared to do that work, we need to stand up and protect our Torontonians.
Thank
you. Safe injection sites, I'm against that. I'm not for that. I would like to see a hotline for people who are addicted to drugs. There's an opioid crisis. If certain people, have decided that they agree that they are addicted to drugs, we should have a phone number that people can call in and have the services available for them to get detox. Right? With the new legislation of marijuana from the federal government, that doesn't help. That doesn't help at all. So I'm against drugs. I'm against safe injection sites. That's not, to me, that's not the way to solve a problem. They're going to die if you give them the opportunity to continue this lifestyle. They're going to kick the bucket, right? So we need to have a hotline. We need to have services for these people if they're ready for detoxification. That's the only thing. I'm against drugs. Absolutely against. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Michael. Robert?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't catch your name.
It's Madison.
Madison. Thank you. This is actually a multi-tiered problem. As far as I know, we do have a Toronto City Public Health Unit that should be addressing these things, but the entire problem is caused by a bigger problem. And if I a little short walk down memory lane for us that are older, if you remember, we used to have things such as eyeglasses and chiropractic care covered by our provincial government, and that got removed, and they put in a fair share health care levy, so we got to pay higher taxes for less services, and you go see your doctor now with a back problem, and they're putting out some type of opioid refined in some different way rather than actually treating it. So BC in response has turned around, and they're actually starting to push back against the manufacturers and stuff, saying that they've hidden the problems. And the reason I did that walk before saying yes, we do have a problem, is because we need to seriously consider when it comes to mental health, whether it's psychological or a dependence issue, that is all psychological health. I'm not saying criminalizing should be legalized. I'm not saying trafficking should be legalized. What I am saying is people with addiction issues should be seriously considered into mental health treatment if they do so want to. And we should be prepared to handle those people. We shouldn't be telling people that have issues that, depending on how you look at things, has been pushed through a medical or a big pharma or whatever. If we can just get back to the end of the day, we have an opioid crisis. This is the way it is. We need to start finding some real solutions. We need to start funding those solutions, or we're going to continue to have a crisis. It's really basic at that point. So yeah.
Thank you, Robert. Pamela?
Thank you. Well, I am a former member of the City of Toronto Board of Health. I sat on the Board of Health for 4 years, and I learned a tremendous amount there about evidence-based decision-making on issues to do with health. Harm reduction works. Harm reduction is the single most proven way of getting people off drugs. I would be an advocate for for safe injection sites, most definitely. I'm also, in a former part of my life, I was a staff member of the Canadian Centre of Excellence for Child Welfare. And in that role, I worked with top researchers out of the University of Toronto Faculty of Social Work on many aspects of research to practice in child welfare. And a lot of that was working with families that were struggling with mental health problems on the part of the parents that created huge problems in family permanency and in care and nurturing of their children. So from many different angles, I do deeply understand the impact of mental health problems in society. There is not one of us in this room that can probably truthfully say we don't have a relative or a dear friend who is struggling with some sort of mental health problem. We need far better treatment for it, multifaceted and starting in youth when the problems often arise. But yes, I am in favor of supervised drug injection sites. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. Iain?
It's easy to talk about the opioid crisis until you are at the gravesite of one of the victims. It is easy to say that we shouldn't have supervised injection sites until you have to stand there and watch a family bury their son because their drugs were laced with fentanyl. That is unacceptable in our city. Selling drugs laced with fentanyl should be treated akin to manslaughter, in my opinion. Supervised injection sites provide a first-line response to the opioid crisis. I believe that they are not the full solution to the problem, but they can help and they can assist people who are addicted to drugs to get off them, to provide them a place where they have access to medical care. Now, that being said, it does not mean that every single supervised injection site is perfect. There needs to be strict regulations, especially with regards to police, to make sure that there are not dealers standing outside of supervised injection sites, selling them the drugs that they will then use inside the site. That is unacceptable. Now, as for the rest of the opioid crisis, and I'm sorry I'm not talking about mental health, not that it's not important, but the opioid crisis is so important. We need easy to access drug treatment options, from detox to residential services, individual counseling, for people who are suffering from a drug addiction, or family members who are suffering from a person who has drug addictions. We need to have drug treatment options that are available without waiting times, without cost, because drugs and drug addiction contributes to crime, and crime needs to be reduced, not encouraged. If we take this problem head on, we will have a solution, and we will be saving lives because of it, and that's worth doing.
That wraps up the question portion of our evening. I'm going to open it up to our candidates to have 1 minute for their closing remarks. I will start with Peggy.
Well, I hope many of you have my card. I have been involved in neighborhood planning matters since 2010. Planning matters affect complete communities or concern complete communities. So they involve a lot of aspects of transit, community facilities, as well as building heights and affordable housing. It really involves the entire planning, affects the entire community. And I have drafted letters to council, I have drafted legislation. I believe that my experience is the most appropriate for the role of city councillor. Thank you.
Thank you all again so much for spending some time with us today. We do all, I'm sure, appreciate it, and it's important as we get ahead to get ready to vote on October 22nd or in advance polls, which are now open until the 14th. But I did want to just thank you all again so much, and one of the things I wanted to leave you with is the idea that Barack Obama says often, and he's a big role model of mine, who could not love Barack Obama, that the rising tides lift all boats. And I want us to think, and I think the last question, thank you for that, Madison, really speaks to the fact that not everyone in our society even has a boat
or a life raft or a life jacket. Some people are struggling just to stay swimming. And there's a lot of issues that we really need to have a deeper understanding of, and I think representative politics is important in that the lived experiences. We need tenants on council, we need people who ride the TTC on council, we need youth on council, and I hope to be all of that and more for you. If you haven't got a chance to ask me a question today, please check out my website, give me a call, stop into my office, shoot me an email. I'm always very happy to hear and engage. Morewithmorley.com. Thank you all so much.
I'll have to look into it. My platform is general. I'm made aware of the specifics of what's going on in Etobicoke Lakeshore with all these kinds of questions. But from my website, if you have the address, it's a general platform. It attacks the Toronto Community Housing way of calculating rent, which is evil. I'm asking for platform edge doors for the subway, and there's other stuff, but it's a little touchy. Either you like it or you don't. So basically, those two things are very important. I need change in the rent calculations for Toronto Housing. You don't know how they calculate rent. It's awful. It's really awful. They're crushing the tenant. When you take three.
Thank you, Michael. Robert?
My name is Robert Gunnyon, Gunnyon. It's actually the same as like a firearm gun. A long history, I can describe it later. Guy in the yellow shirt. My entire platform is basically you guys tell me what to think. I know it's not. Moving forwards, if I got to answer questions, I do wish we could have answered more questions on mental health. Thank you for bringing at least one up. I do wish we could answer more questions on housing. It's a total disaster. Building 5% more housing is not going to reduce rents by 30%, not a chance of staying. This is at a point we're at such a point where there's been so many politics injected into this. We just need to represent the people with common sense math. You guys are seeing road questions. It just doesn't add up. So, Gunnyon, Gunnyon, guy in the yellow shirt. He's going to represent you.
Thank you, Robert. Pamela?
Thank you very much. In my opening statement, I went over my record of achievement as an experienced elected official with deep roots in our community and a passion for positive change. The psychologists tell us that past behavior is the best predictor for future behavior. So I would say to you, look at the past behavior of the people that you are considering voting for. My past behavior shows what I stand for and what I can offer. I have a strong record of being connected to our community and working hard for positive change. I have a record of excellent attendance at board meetings, unlike the incumbent. I have a background in science, specifically environmental science, so I would take on stewardship of our beautiful parks and green spaces. A background in education and child welfare, so I care for those who are the most vulnerable. A background as a school board trustee, so I can work with the city and the school board to optimize the many overlapping areas of jurisdiction between the two organizations. I have a background of being an award-winning champion of road safety and active transportation, so I can help to create the healthy, safe communities that are my vision. I ask for your support on voting day. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience. You have stayed through to the end. The end is in sight. Now, I want to thank you guys because you've given me an opportunity to share my ideas and my vision for this community. Because I love this area. I was raised here, and I will do my utmost to preserve its character, its integrity, to make sure that it is just as good, if not better, than when we found it. Now, I was raised to believe that there's a time for talking, but then there's also a time for action. There's a time for us to come together to discuss the big ideas, to talk about the issues that matter, housing affordability, TTC reliability, how the city takes and spends your money. But there's also a time for action. There's a time for us to get things done together. And that is what I'm committed to. Not just talking about the issues, but working to get things done for you. I believe that it is time for a new blood at City Hall. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all of our candidates for your closing remarks. Your presence this evening demonstrates accountability to our community. Best of luck in the days ahead. Thank you again. And before we leave, I'd just like to call your attention to this event that will be happening on Wednesday, October 17th. It's the Transit Town Hall, Etobicoke Transit Town Hall, at 2379 Lakeshore Boulevard West at the Martin Luther Lutheran Church. So just wanted to let you know that this is happening on October 17th. If you can make it out, please do.